Ever watch someone grow up, from being a tiny baby to figuring out adulthood and just wonder, how does all that actually happen? It feels like this giant, super complex puzzle.
It really does. And sometimes it feels like all the pieces are just scattered everywhere. But luckily, there are ways to start organizing those pieces. Developmental stage theories are kind of like maps for that puzzle.
Okay, maps, I like that. So they give us a framework to understand the journey.
Exactly. They help us see the patterns, the progressions as people develop. Today, we're looking at two really influential ones.
Right. We're diving into Piaget's ideas about how our thinking develops our cognitive side, and Erikson's theory, which is more about the social and, well, emotional challenges we face.
Yeah, and getting a handle on these isn't just like academic homework. It can genuinely give you insights into your own life, those aha moments maybe,
Hmm.
and also help you understand the people around you a bit better.
Okay, let's start with the thinking part then, Piaget. What's the core idea there?
Well, John Piaget was a real pioneer. He basically turned the understanding of child psychology on its head. His big thing was that kids aren't just mini adults who know less stuff,
Right, they think differently.
fundamentally differently. He argued they actively build their understanding. They explore, they interact with things, they experiment. It's very hands-on.
So they're like little scientists figuring out the world.
Sort of, yeah. And he saw this happening in distinct stages. Each stage has its own unique way of thinking, its own logic, almost. A baby exploring things with their mouth is operating very differently from, say, a 10-year-old solving a math problem.
Makes sense. And you mentioned they build their understanding. How does that building process work, according to him?
He talked about adaptation. It's how we handle new information. And adaptation has two sides to it, assimilation and accommodation.
Okay, assimilation and accommodation. Break those down for us.
Sure. Assimilation is when you encounter something new and try to fit it into what you already know or understand. Piaget called these existing understandings schemas.
Like mental categories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So imagine a toddler has a schema for dog, 4 legs, fur, maybe it barks. They see a sheep for the first time. It has 4 legs and fur.
So they might yell doggy.
Precisely. They're assimilating the sheep into their existing dog schema. It kind of fits, so they use the label they know.
But it's not really a dog, so what happens then?
That's where accommodation comes in. Accommodation is when you have to change your existing schema, or maybe you create a whole new one, because the new information just doesn't fit the old box.
So someone corrects the toddler, no, that's a sheep, it goes, bah, and the toddler notices the differences.
Right. The wool is different, the sound is different, so they adjust. They accommodate the new information by refining their animal schemas, creating a separate category for sheep. It's this constant back and forth, fitting things in and adjusting the fit that drives cognitive growth.
Assimilation and accommodation. Got it. A constant tuning of how we see the world. Now, let's shift over to Erikson. His theory feels broader, covering our whole lives.
Yes, that's a key difference. Erikson, building on psychoanalytic ideas, looked at psychosocial development, that interplay between our psychological selves and our social world across the entire lifespan, not just childhood.
And he also talked about stages, but they were different kinds of stages.
Right. Erikson's stages are defined by psychosocial crises. Now, crisis sounds dramatic, but he meant it more like a turning point, a central challenge or question that's specific to that period of life.
So not necessarily a disaster, but a critical period for development.
Exactly. It's a time of increased potential for growth, but also vulnerability. How we navigate and resolve the core conflict at each stage really shapes our personality, our identity, and how well we cope with later stages.
And you're saying how we resolve one affects the next one, like steps on a ladder.
Very much so. And especially in the early stages, infancy, toddlerhood parents and caregivers are absolutely crucial. Their sensitivity, their responsiveness, it hugely impacts how a child navigates these first few crises. They really set the tone.
Okay, this is fascinating. We have Piaget looking at how thinking matures and Erikson looking at these social emotional challenges across life. How do these two perspectives overlap, especially in the very beginning?
They connect really beautifully in infancy, those first couple of years. For Piaget, this is the sensorimotor stage. What does that mean? Babies learn through their senses, touch, taste, sight, and their actions, grabbing, moving, kicking.
Learning by doing, basically.
Totally. And a huge cognitive leap during this time is developing object permanence. The idea that, just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's gone forever.
The magic of peekaboo. Before they get that, it's like things literally disappear.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind. Quite literally. Now, map that onto Erikson's first stage for the same period. Trust versus mistrust.
Okay.
Trust versus mistrust. Infants are completely dependent, right? For food, comfort, safety. If their caregivers are reliable, consistent, warm, sensitive to their needs, the infant develops a basic sense of trust. Trust in the world, trust in people.
And if not?
If care is inconsistent, neglectful, or harsh, they develop mistrust, a sense that the world is unreliable or dangerous. This sense of trust or mistrust becomes foundational.
And I can see the connection already. If a baby feels trust, feels secure.
They feel safe enough to explore, to reach out, touch things, crawl around, engage with the world in all those sensorimotor ways Piaget talked about.
Yeah.
That secure attachment, that trust, provides a safe base for learning and cognitive development.
So the emotional foundation supports the cognitive exploration.
Wow. Okay, what happens next as they move into toddlerhood, say ages 2 to maybe 7?
Piaget calls this the preoperational stage. This is where symbolic thought really takes off. Language explodes, pretend play becomes huge, a block can be a car, a stick can be a wand.
Fun stage. But you said Piaget also noted limitations.
Yeah, their thinking is still quite different from adults. A key feature is egocentrism. It's not selfishness, but difficulty seeing things from another person's physical or mental perspective. You know, the classic example is a child covering their own eyes and thinking you can't see them. Right, because they can't see you. Makes perfect sense from their viewpoint. So what's the Erikson crisis during this preoperational period?
Erikson's second stage lines up here. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Toddlers are mastering walking, talking, wanting to do things themselves. Feed themselves, dress themselves, choose a toy.
The me do it phase.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The challenge is for caregivers to support this budding independence, this sense of autonomy, without being overly critical or controlling. If a child is constantly told no, or you can't, or is shamed for accidents or making a mess,
They develop doubt about their own abilities.
precisely, shame and doubt. But if they're encouraged, allowed to try, within safe limits, of course, maybe helped gently when they struggle, they develop that sense of autonomy, that feeling of, I can manage myself.
So patience from parents is key here, letting them try, even if it's messy or slow.
Hugely important for fostering that sense of independence. Okay, moving into the preschool years, maybe 3 to 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Piaget still largely sees them in the pre-operational stage, refining symbolic thought, but logic is still developing.
An Erikson stage.
Erikson calls this initiative versus guilt. Preschoolers are really starting to initiate activities, make plans, take on tasks, engage in more complex pretend play. They're exploring what kind of person they can be.
Becoming little leaders in their games.
Yeah, and they're also developing a conscience, a sense of right and wrong. The crisis here is balancing this urge to take initiative with the potential for feeling guilty if their plans go wrong, or if they overstep boundaries set by adults. Encouraging their ideas while providing gentle guidance helps them develop initiative without being crushed by guilt.
Okay, so trust, then autonomy, then initiative. What about when they hit elementary school age, say 7 to 11?
Cognitively, Piaget sees a big shift. This is the concrete operational stage. Now, children can think logically, but mostly about concrete things, stuff they can see, touch, manipulate. They grasp concepts like conservation.
That's the idea that the amount of water stays the same even if you pour it into a different shaped glass.
Exactly. They understand that superficial changes don't alter the core amount. They can also classify objects, understand sequences better. Their reasoning becomes much more organized, but still tied to the physical world. Abstract thinking is still tricky.
Okay, more logical about real-world stuff, and the Erikson challenge for this age.
This is industry versus inferiority. School becomes central. Kids are focused on learning skills, reading, writing, math, but also social skills, sports, hobbies. They want to be competent, productive, industrious.
They want to feel good at things compared to their peers.
Yes, peer comparison becomes much more important. The crisis is developing a sense of competence and mastery versus feeling inferior or inadequate if they struggle academically or socially or feel they just don't measure up.
And again, teachers, parents, peers, they all play a role in whether a child feels industrious or inferior.
Absolutely. Encouragement, opportunities to succeed, help with challenges, recognizing effort, not just outcome, all that helps build that sense of industry. And briefly, Piaget's final stage, starting around adolescence, is formal operational thought, where abstract and hypothetical thinking becomes possible.
Right, thinking about possibilities, justice, future scenarios.
Exactly. But those 4 early Erikson stages, trust, autonomy, initiative, industry, really lay so much groundwork.
It's incredible how intertwined it all is. The thinking skills Piaget described seem to enable or interact with the social challenges Erikson highlighted.
They really do feed into each other. A child's cognitive abilities affect how they understand social rules or peer interactions. And their social-emotional state, feeling secure, feeling confident, impacts their willingness to learn and tackle cognitive challenges.
So these theories, Piaget's and Erikson's, they aren't just separate lists of stages. They offer complementary views on this incredibly complex process of growing up.
That's a great way to put it. They're powerful frameworks. Of course, we need to remember they are models. Real development is messier.
Hmm.
People progress at different rates, experiences vary wildly. These aren't rigid boxes everyone fits into perfectly.
Good point. They're guides, not absolute rules. But understanding them, thinking about that journey through trust, autonomy, initiative, industry,
Hmm.
it does make you see things differently.
It really can. It can foster empathy. Like understanding why a toddler is having a meltdown about wanting the red cup might connect back to that drive for autonomy. Or seeing a child hesitant to join a game might relate to fears of inferiority.
It adds a layer of understanding to our interactions.
Definitely. It helps make sense of behaviors and feelings, both in others and sometimes when reflecting on our own past experiences.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've journeyed through some key ideas from Piaget on how thinking develops, from sensorimotor actions to concrete logic, and from Erikson on the psychosocial hurdles we face, building trust, finding autonomy, taking initiative, and developing industry, especially in those critical early years.
Yeah, two really rich perspectives on development. And hopefully it gives you, the listener, something to chew on.
Right. So maybe the thought to leave you with is this. How does understanding these stages, these cognitive shifts and psychosocial challenges, maybe change how you think about your own path or how you relate to the kids, the teenagers, even the adults in your life?
It's a lens that can definitely shift perspective. There's always more to learn about how we become who we are.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for exploring this with us today. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.